Welcome back to the Brenda Perryman Show right here on TV 33 WHPR Comcast 20 or 90 in Oakland County and in Detroit. And I welcome you back. And I have one of my favorite guests here, Miss Tanisha Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning, Brenda. How are you?
Fine, fine. I'm trying to get my audience to start writing their own book.
Absolutely.
But first and foremost, your new book is called When the Smoke Clears.
Ironically.
And we had the firefighters
That's
on.
right.
And
That's
we
right.
didn't plan it.
Yeah,
we didn't plan black and white either. We just down like that.
Right.
We're just down
We've
like
done
that.
it enough. We know.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So how you been?
I've been really good. How are you?
Fine, fine, fine.
It's always a pleasure.
I
Always
am
a pleasure.
always running into people who said, I need you to help me write my story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I said, wait a minute. You write your story.
Right. Right. Right.
How many of you out there want to write a book about either your life or something that has happened, something you observed about the city of Detroit and so forth? Well, there's certain things you have to do, and you have to know exactly what you want to write
That's
about.
right. That's right. So a lot of people want to write a book. Everybody, let's just be clear. Everybody has a story to tell. Let's start there. Everybody has a story to tell. There has to be something that makes your story different. What makes you stand out as an author, as a person? What have you been through that nobody else has quite been through? Or maybe you can tell it in a way that makes me think differently about it. So maybe I've been through the same thing, but maybe you write it in a certain way where it's like, wow, I never looked at it like that.
Well, one thing about books, when you start them off, shouldn't there be something that grabs your attention?
Absolutely. That in that first chapter, if you don't grab the reader's attention, you've almost lost them. I have so many books at home that I started and they are on the shelf. They are on the shelf. I never finished them. If you don't grab me right away, and there are books that I've read from cover to cover in like a night because they've been that good. So that's the type of book you want. You know.
Well, let's familiarize the audience with you once again. You were always pretty good in English, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You just fell in love with English.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
And so when you went, she calling me ma'am, isn't that sweet? Then you went away to college.
To college, University of Missouri, yes.
And you majored in?
Journalism, actually. So I work for newspapers, magazines. Oh, wow. DTE Energy, marketing and advertising firms. I've done it for almost every industry. I've done it for the military, you name it.
Okay, but you have to, do you understand technical writing?
I do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Technical writing, I believe, is the writing where you're giving instruction. You have to write down instructions.
Yeah. It's a little bit different than creative writing.
Right.
More so
well, you can't be creative.
Right. There's no room for creativity, but more so the manuals, like for the military,
right.
For automotive manuals and things like that. More so the instructions and the schematics and things like that.
Right. And the ability to read is an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful thing. So what do you find as a mistake with some people as they begin to write their book? Not just a matter of a boring introduction. What if they have a great introduction?
Yes.
But what are some other things that can happen? And you can call in to ask questions about your book.
Absolutely.
313-868-0342, 868-0351, or 868-4336, area code 313.
I would say, Miss Brenda, the number one, I can't tell you how many books that I edit, and I get to the end and I'm like, what was the point? You have a really good story. You told me your life story. What was the point? What was the point? And what's in it for me? If I'm a reader and you want me to pay $12.95, $9.95, some people $29.95 for a book, there has to be something in it for me. So I think a lot of authors forget to turn the book and the story back to the reader. What's in it for the reader? Tell me how your story can affect my life. How can your story apply to my life?
And what feeling am I supposed to get?
Right, and what feeling do I walk away with?
Right.
Yeah.
After reading your book.
Absolutely.
What is the best book you've ever read?
The best book I would say I've ever read, that's funny, I was thinking about that on the way over here, and it deals with fire as well, and it's called Beauty for Ashes. And if you go to Amazon and look for Beauty for Ashes, you'll find a lot of books. But this book was about a particular woman who had been abused by her husband to the point that he burned her, he left her in a field for dead, and she survived. And she actually put pictures in the book of her burned body. And where he left her and everything. But that was one of the books that I read in a day, because she kept me intrigued from beginning to end. I had to know how the story ended. I knew she lived, but I wanted to know what the end looked like.
Yeah, you wanted to know her journey.
That's right. That's right.
Any other mistakes? Well, I'll tell you one from some of the books that I read.
Mm-hmm.
That people send me books. I said, I'm not a professional book
Right,
writer.
right.
I mean, I do write,
Right.
and I do have a book,
Mm-hmm.
or some books, but I notice people will jump from one thing to another.
That's right.
And then end up going back to that other thing.
Right.
It's not in any.
It's not organized in any type of way. You have got to start with an outline. The biggest mistake that writers do is they just sit down and start writing. And if you've been doing this for a while, maybe that works for you. That works for me. I don't always need an outline. But everybody can't stay on task and on focus when they're writing a book over the course of 3 years. So 6 months ago, you may have been talking about marriage, and now you've decided to pick the book back up again and start writing, and now you're talking about babysitting. So you totally jump subjects, and then you want to go back to marriage. So it has to be organized in a way.
It should have some kind of structure.
So a lot of structure. You need structure. Even in fiction, you need structure.
Well, I always tell people, as far as theater is concerned, and I direct plays and so forth.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I always put myself as an audience
The
member.
seat of the audience, yes.
I always want to see, well, what could they be thinking now?
Right.
How can I keep them awake?
Right.
How can I make sure that they're learning something? How can I make sure they are enjoying it?
Right, right. And the key with a book, even with a play, is to start off strong, pull back a little bit, go higher, pull back a little bit, go higher, pull back a little bit. There may be a climax in the book and then come back down.
Then you get that standing ovation,
Right.
and you say, it worked.
Right.
Because I know how I want the audience to respond.
Absolutely.
I was directing something once where I told the actors, I said, I want them to get a big laugh right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, Andre, when you say this line, the audience is going to go, ooh,
Absolutely.
stop, And so you have to totally be in tune with what you want to
Mm-hmm.
say.
So the struggle that I find, Brenda, what's so funny, you said you want the audience to laugh here, is I have authors who will say, laugh here in their book.
Oh, no,
Or
you
they'll
don't.
say,
No, you
or
don't.
they say laugh out loud in the book. And I know this is the age of social media and Twitter and Facebook, but there are people who actually type laugh out loud, or isn't that funny, or this is where you should be feeling XYZ, or let me say that again. It's a book. You don't need to type let me say that again. If they didn't get it, they'll read it over again.
Have you ever read a book where one line, a few lines, the person or the character is one place, then you get to the other line, they're another place. There was
Right.
no transition.
There was no progression.
It
Right.
was no end of chapter.
Mhm.
It was
Absolutely.
nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm getting manuscripts now that simply aren't broken into chapters, which is really weird to me. Just the formatting of it, where
Why do we
people-
have chapters?
we have chapters to break up main ideas, really. So for me, when I get a manuscript and I don't see chapters, I'm scared, because that tells me you didn't do any type of outline. There's no type of structure. And I, as the editor, have to make a conscious decision of where we break. Where do we break?
Right.
You know,
right.
so.
Well, there are a lot of members of our audience who have been very involved in political campaign and grassroots work, which I feel is very, very exciting.
It is.
It's something to inform the audience, even if you just took last year's mayoral election in
Right.
Detroit. You can, if you've been around and dealing with that, you can write a story about
right.
what
You
what
can.
happened. But you have to put in some kind of structure, and you have to make me see. I want to know what do you want me to do
Right.
from this? Will
Right.
you want me to be better
Right.
informed, so I could go out and talk about it? or what?
Absolutely, absolutely. So books either entertain, some educate and entertain. So you've got to decide as the author, which one are you trying to do? Because it can't just be, I just want to tell my story. We're not selling books just to tell a good story. So I think that's the struggle. A lot of people, and some people actually don't know how to tell a good story.
That's
You know.
true.
So
So what
that's the
should they
problem
do?
too.
What
That's-
should they
that's
do?
the problem. So that's where a developmental editor comes in.
Do you do that?
I do some developmental editing, but if it's so bad, sometimes I sit down with the author and we write whole chapters together, because there are some people who just don't know. They just don't know where to start. They don't know where to end. They don't know what to put, what not to put. There are people who say, well, I want to tell my story, but I don't want to tell this part. Well, guess what? That may be the best part. So you've got to make a decision as an author for the brand. Do I put it in? Do I make it fiction so that people don't know it's me? Or how do I work it in?
Well, what about people who may say, well, I'm not a good speller? That shouldn't keep them from writing a book, should it?
No, I wouldn't say that should keep you from writing a book. You definitely want to hire an editor. And let me say this. My second book, which is in the making right now, has been edited 5 times. 5 times, Miss Brenda. So there's an editor, there's a proofreader, and then at the end of the day, I'm the author, so I still have to go over it myself because it's my book. My name is on the front cover. So I think a lot of people, they go through the first editing process, and then they say, okay, I'm ready to go to print. And then they get upset because the books are on shelves and people are finding spelling and grammatical mistakes.
Oh, that is so embarrassing.
It is. And you kill your brand. So, I mean, especially if it's your first book, people will say, you know what, I couldn't even read the story because I couldn't get past all of the spelling and grammatical errors. So, you don't want that out there like that.
That's why you have to have an editor. And tell the audience all the things that an editor does.
So I think people think of an editor as just a person who catches the misspelled words. It's much more than that. For me, I look at my client's project as a whole. Who's your audience? Are you reaching your target audience? I've edited the book, and if I've gotten to the end and if I say, what was your message? There's a problem, because somewhere in there you didn't tell me what your message was. You told me a good story, but you didn't tell me what your message was. Also, the editor is there for grammatical errors. We write like we speak, unfortunately, a lot of us. So unless it's fiction and there is slang in the book, the editor is going in and correcting that. The editor is also looking for consistency. If you spelled Brenda one way in chapter 1, you get to chapter 5 and all of a sudden Brenda has an H on the end, we've got a problem. And your editor needs to be able to catch that.
Wow. It's amazing. You know what I noticed too? Some people overuse commas.
Yes.
What is that about?
Well, people overuse them and some people underuse them. I get a lot of people who are just have run-on sentences with no breaks. I'm like, can we put a comma here? Can we put a comma there? A period. And a lot of times people are putting commas where they need to be periods. They're 2 totally different sentences.
I've seen that. Now, tell us about commas. I really want you all to know about commas. When should we use them, when not?
So basically, the comma is used for lists. So if you're saying she was pretty, she was bold and vivacious or something like that. But the issue becomes there's a thing called the serial comma, which is in a series of 3. You have people who are using the serial comma before and or. It's not incorrect. It's just sort of outdated. So.
Well, you're right, because I saw that just yesterday. Someone said, and before they get to the and, they use the comma.
They use the comma.
Instead of, if I say toys and things.
Right.
No comma.
No comma.
And the period should be at the end of a...
At the end of a sentence.
I know. But the sentence, with some people, like you said,
it becomes run-on sentences.
I have seen sentences that long.
Yeah, paragraphs. Paragraphs.
And I'm saying, where is the period here?
Right. So as the editor, I've got to decide, okay, how can we break this up? Do we really need to say all of this? Because sometimes we're just wordy. We're just wordy to be wordy. And one thing you've got to understand about the publishing industry is, guess what? You're paying for this paper. So if you're publishing a book, you need to say what you need to say in as less words as possible. Because you're paying for paper.
Why don't you talk to the audience about self-publishing?
So self-publishing, the difference in self-publishing and traditional publishing is self-publishing, you have to do all the work. So you have to copyright, you have to order the ISBN, you have to get with the cover designer to get your cover design, you find your own editor, you find your own printer. So it's work, but you keep all the royalties. So that's where a lot of people are going with self-publishing as opposed to turning it over to a traditional publisher or pitching to a large publishing house.
So, but if they don't have an editor, that can be a problem. You have to get an editor.
You have to have, even if you do an ebook, let's say you're just taking your blog and turning it into an ebook, you still need an editor because you put fresh content out there on the web. That's your footprint on the World Wide Web. And now, if it has misspellings, Nobody's gonna buy the book when it comes out because guess what? Your blog, your ebook, everything I see from you has typos and
And it
misspelled
makes it
words,
hard.
and it makes it hard to read over that. And you can't remove reviews on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com when people go and write reviews for your book. If it's bad and they say, you know what, she had a good story, but I couldn't get past the spelling errors, you can't take that down. That's there for life. So even if you go back and correct the book, well, now
Wow.
that review is out there. So.
Oh, well, that's that's a good point
Right.
because a lot of people say, "Oh, I got a book coming out," or
And they rush. People are everything is in a hurry. Everything is rushed. And even, don't just have your editor edit the book. They need to edit the front cover, the back cover, any marketing and promotional material you have going out for the book. Because if I get a flyer and it has a typo on it, it can be for a play. Most of the time, I don't go.
Theo's on the line, my good friend Theo, who's also a host. Good morning, Theo.
Happy Friday to both of you.
Good morning.
Same to you.
I want to ask one. The best book I ever read was Uncle Tom's Cabin. I want to know if either of you have read that book.
Well, I read little parts of it.
I read it a long time ago in school.
Why is that your favorite book? What do you like about it?
Well, what I liked about it was, number one, the person with the most integrity in the whole book was Uncle Tom. And you find that as you finish reading through the book, the excitement of it, the fact that the bounty hunter, I guess they call him that, the one who was sold slaves, was going to take Uncle Tom and a young lady in there named Liza, who was also a slave. And his wife told him that he should run and not allow himself to be taken and put on a slave block. And he said, no, I won't do that, because he cared about his wife and his children, and he knew that if he did run away, the kind of thing that would befall, them. But anyway, it's an excellent, excellent read. It really, really is. And it just appears to me that over time, some institutional group decided to take the term Uncle Tom and make it a negative. But if you read that book from cover to cover, you will find that he had more integrity than anybody in the book. The other question is the word fun. As I was coming up, in a sentence, it would say, example, the children were having fun, or the children had a lot of fun. Today, the way that word fun is used is really awkward sounding to me. Somebody will say, I had a fun time.
Right.
I'm like, when did that start out?
That's ridiculous. I don't know where that came from.
Right.
It's like this was something they were talking about down around the house.
Right.
And
so the problem is people are losing vocabulary, and I mean, get a thesaurus or Google words that are synonymous to the word fun. You've got, what does fun look like?
And in a dictionary, they will have it in a sentence for you.
They will. They have an example. But don't use the word fun. The word fun is too easy. Actually, it's elementary. Give me something intriguing. If it's an adult book, you can use the word fun for children's books, of course. But if it's an adult book, tell me what fun looks like. Well, we have fun. Well, what does that mean?
Absolutely. Another thing that people do, Theo, and
is
the word a lot. I mean, the words a lot. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be a space lot, but they use a lot. They've made it one word. Mm-hmm. But Theo, I was thinking about you as I was talking to her before you called, because I thought about Hood Research and what you do, and the history behind Hood Research and about people starting their organizations. And I just thought about you, and that would be a great book to have.
It's interesting. Somebody did mention that to me, and we have been in existence over 20 years, so I would I probably would get a ghostwriter or somebody to help with it. It's something that I'm very excited about and have been for quite a long time, but I have to look into that. Maybe you'll be, interested in working on it, Brenda. But the other question also that I have is,
quickly, Theo,
is there a book, any amount of pages that a publisher would consider?
What was the question?
Any amount
You
of
know,
pages.
in
what's
other
the
words,
proper amount of
yes,
pages?
I was in a bookstore once, and there was a hardcover book there, about the size of the palm of your hand, and it had about 5 pages in it. I don't know whether it was self-published or not, but I was just curious as to whether there is any criteria for size of
So,
or a book or the.
The
so
size of it.
right. So for fiction books versus a novel versus a novella, there are certain page counts. I would say for nonfiction books, there aren't necessarily certain page counts. There are people who publish, 20 and 30 page books, but I think you need to price them accordingly. That's where we kind of go wrong. You print a 30-page book and then you sell it for $15.99. No, when there are 150 page books for $12.99. So
Right, right. And small books and
small
so forth.
books, right? Pocket books.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Theo, we're going to have to get ready to
Thank
call
you.
it
Oh,
close.
no
to
problem.
it.
Thank you
And,
so
I
much.
want you to watch Table Talk if you get an opportunity, because we have some things on there that you might be able to help us with.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you, Theo. And these are great. Thank you. These are great books that people should get.
Yes. These are resources for writers. So the first is the Associated Press style book. This is a book that the editors follow. It comes out every 2 years. So this is the 2013 version. And this is the Christian Writer's Manual of Style. It tells you how many Bible verses you can actually quote in your book without getting written permission.
Wow.
It also tells you how to write God versus God and him and he and all of the different things that come along with writing as a Christian author. So there's a book dedicated just to Christian authors and Manual of Style.
Oh, okay. And how could people, what's your website? How can they get in touch with you?
So my website is www.soitiswritten.net. Soitiswritten.net.
SOITWRITTEN
.net.
.net. So once again, you've schooled us. You have schooled us. So remember, when you write your story, look up Tanisha.
Absolutely.
Look me up, and I could tell you where she is. Believe me.
Right.
So everybody, stay tuned for Table Talk. We'll be on in just a few minutes, and we'll see you next Friday with another great show. And of course, we have Kimmy Horn coming on in a couple of weeks too. So I'll see you then.